Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. We are here with another Underdog Fantasy Best Ball Mania draft, NFL Best Ball, $3 million up top, and we're drafting 3 times a week here on the Occupy Fantasy YouTube channel. Welcome, I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, joined by Chris Rooney, our NFL manager, MLB manager, Best Ball manager. Chris, I got any other credentials I need to add to those titles?
I don't know. We'll see how. I guess maybe preseason contributor as well. We have that kicking off next week. I know a lot of longtime subscribers here, Brian. Very excited about preseason daily fantasy. That'll be starting next Thursday, a week from today. So I'm sure if we are on here doing a show talking about Best Ball Mania 4 once again, we'll be layering in some of our thoughts on this Cleveland Browns New York Jets Hall of Fame game next week. Looking forward to that. Brian, before we jump into the draft here, I did want to talk a little bit about the fact that training camps have started. We're starting to get some actionable information that is actually moving the draft board around. I know that this is your first year really attacking Best Ball Mania, Best Ball contests a little bit more seriously, but obviously we've both been some season-long players for a long time in other formats, managed leagues. In your process, how do you weigh the news you get from early training camp practices? I feel like the viewers would benefit from your insight.
Yeah, it's tough, man. It's certainly tough to balance the first actionable information we've had in months versus not overreacting to every single little
Mm-hmm.
camp report that we get. For example, I think the Chiefs wide receiver situation is the best example of this, where over the past couple of months, we've been drafting Kadarius Toney round 7, round 8, Sky Moore round 10, round 11, Rashee Rice round 13-ish, Valdez Scantling 14, 15, Richie James end of drafts and or not drafted. Now all of a sudden we get the knee tweak by Kadarius Toney. Unsure if he's going to be ready for week 1. Sounds likely, but I guess Kadarius Toney, so you never know. Then we get the reports that Richie James is the only guy that's being targeted on day 1, and now Rashee Rice is uncoverable, and now Sky Moore is the leader of the team, and he has a connection with. So all these guys are getting positive buzz outside of Valdez Scantling, and we've seen some movement as a result.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to project Chiefs wide receivers right now is to kind of cheat a little bit, Brian. I think we're going to see guys rotate in and out of quote unquote starring roles at wide receiver in this offense as the year marches on. I think at this point, it's safe to assume Tony's going to miss a little bit of time. It's just unclear how much that's going to be. Right now, I'm much more interested in drafting Sky Moore than I was before we got this news about Tony's knee surgery. Some of the other movers that are moving on the board right now, as far as ADP goes, biggest move on the board, Brian, this is on our ADP tracker on the website. Zamir White, the running back for the Las Vegas Raiders. Josh Jacobs doesn't seem like he intends to show up anytime soon to Raiders camp. Are you buying into Zamir White as the starter here?
I mean, I'm taking some shots on him, and I have been taking shots ever since we got news that Jacobs may not sign this deal, and that was a month or so ago. And I've seen some comparisons to the James Conner, Le'Veon Bell situation. Draft James Conner at running back 70 or whatever it was when Le'Veon Bell was threatening to hold out. And maybe we get a similar situation here. But I will say Conner showed flashes before then. Zamir White hasn't shown anything. Like, we couldn't even get production out of him in preseason DFS, and he couldn't really get on the field last year. And now he's not even taking first team reps fully by himself this year so far through camp. Amir Abdullah is splitting reps with him. So I get it. I mean, again, if he turns out to be a committee back and we take him in round 18, he's a committee back all year, around 17 now, that's still value. So I'm not going to not take that. I just think we should temper expectations and think that he may be a league winner of some sorts if he's going to be a top 12 back. In this offense, I don't see that happening, but I think, Chris, you have to still take some shots if Jacobs is really serious about this.
Yeah, no, we're aligned there. It's not exactly like he's super expensive yet, but with his price climbing, it becomes a little bit more of a decision point, especially with guys lingering out there like Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette, Ezekiel Elliott, Kareem Hunt. Sounds like we may get a resolution on this Dalvin Cook situation shortly. Seems to be visiting with the Jets as we speak. Honestly, I feel like that's going to lead to a contract. Brian, I did jump into a draft room while we were talking here. I've got the 4th overall pick here. This is Best Ball Mania 4. And we have just kicked off the draft. Justin Jefferson at the first pick, per usual. We will see how things go here. I think on the last team we did together, I did a Tyreek Hill build. So maybe we're going to do that again. I don't know. We'll see.
Are you at the point now Have you drafted enough to where you're
Oh,
starting to try to balance exposures, or not necessarily?
yes, I almost and it's becoming difficult for me, Brian, because I almost feel like I'm deliberately drafting worse players than I would initially prefer.
Yeah, yeah.
Because if I don't do that, I'm never going to get exposure to them. So that's kind of how I'm approaching things. I did go with Christian McCaffrey here at the 4th overall pick. I actually did a team last night from this exact spot and went with Cooper Cup.
Okay.
Thought the draft didn't go super well. I ended up going with an Eagles stack in the second, third round with Devonta Smith and Jalen Hurts, which, we'll see how that goes. But I do want a little bit more McCaffrey than I have in my portfolio right now. I think this is draft number 42 for me right now in Best Ball Mania 4. So just trying to make sure I'm balancing things out with my first round picks so I get relatively equal allocation to these guys.
Yeah, especially the first 5 guys or so, right? Like you're not necessarily taking worse players by taking Cup over McCaffrey or Hill over Cup or whatever it is, right? You just want equal exposure to those guys. I understand. Maybe once you get later, back half of round 1 or round 2 and round 3, definitely. Yeah, you may not want. You may want to start taking some stands there, but I don't want to lose Best Ball Mania or any Best Ball draft just because CMC goes for 35 points in all 3 playoff weeks, and I have like 3% as a choice, right? I want to get equal exposure there. There was a question I was going to ask you. Now, well, I guess just a quick point. You said that the draft didn't go so well yesterday, and I wouldn't even. I mean, a couple have happened to me over the past week or so where it spirals out of control. There's nothing you can really do about it. People take you get sniped a lot, or the timer runs out, or whatever it may be. Right? You're just gonna have. I mean, I think people should understand that if you're drafting more than one team, right? There are gonna be some drafts where shit, this didn't go my way, and you just gotta shake it off and go to the next draft.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, you got to stick to your process and try to draft the best team possible. But we like to talk about having like guiding macros for making decisions, especially in the daily fantasy side of things, Brian. So I do tend to try to continue to correlate, even if I miss out on maybe like an ideal week 17 game stack. I try to find like a way to backdoor that if I can. So I got kind of sniped on all my opportunities last night, for example, with a Arizona Cardinals bring back on my Eagles stack with Jalen Hurts. Ended up taking a last round pick on a backup running back for the Cardinals, Keontae Ingram. Am I expecting that to be like an amazing value? No, but obviously there's a low percentage outcome there that could still happen. And in a tournament like this, I'm okay with making decisions like that in a spot in the draft where I'm not really probably going to get any contribution from the player I'm selecting anyways. So
Yeah, I mean, just to that point, right? Like you see some people, there's a lot of discussion nowadays on week 17 correlation on Twitter and whatnot. But when you have the choice between 2 backup running backs, we can't accurately predict which starter is going to get hurt of those 2. So why not take the guy if his starter does get hurt? You have correlation late in the season, right? Like to me, it's a no-brainer. Talent and situation aside, all that's equal. And most of the time, in round 18, it pretty much is.
So we're coming back up here, going with McCaffrey in the first round, Brian. This is a spot where I definitely feel like I'm going to load up on receivers now for the next, 5 or 6 rounds, maybe not consecutively, but by the time we get to round 7, I want to have at least 4 of them on my team. Might be somewhat basic information if you've been watching these streams, other streams throughout the season, but I feel like now that we have training camps kicking off, some more people are going to be filing in to kind of see what we think about these contests. So never bad to repeat, I think, some strategic information. Going to go with Chris Olave here. I think, just going with the best wide receiver available is never a bad strategy.
Totally agree. And I see Pollard just went right after your pick, and he's starting to climb up a bit, starting to get some more rumblings in social media and in content. People wondering why he's even a late second round pick to begin with. I guess people are still I guess the ADP is still a little concerned about a vet signing there. They have shown zero interest so far, so he's starting to climb up a little bit. But I think it's safe to say, Chris, that if no one signs there, Pollard could be the running back 1 overall by the end of the year. But we do have to dodge some bullets to get to the beginning of the season.
Yeah, we have a new offensive coordinator, right? And that can really shift things here. I know in the past they had mentioned, there's a workload limit that they prefer with Pollard. Like this was when we had the old days of Pollard and Zeke. No matter who's available, Pollard's only going to get so many touches. I don't think that's the case anymore here, Brian. I feel like Pollard has a path to being a true 3-down back with 20 to 25 touches, if not more per game. So could be a league winner for sure in the second round. And really, you want to make sure that you are not taking too many shots on players at that position early in the draft. That might sound a little strange. Some of the data out there is really powerful about how if you are spending 2, 3, even 4 picks early on running backs, you're actually potentially increasing your odds that you're finding a bust in there, right? So I'm actually going to do something a little off the beaten path here, and I'll take the best quarterback available, Josh Allen. So I think I have a chance here at players that all could be number one at their positions this year. Maybe less so with Chris Olave, but top 5 upside with Olave. And I feel like that's a pretty good way to orient yourself with your first few picks, is try to have some of the best players available at each position if you can get them.
Totally agree. And bold move there by Luke at 3-1, taking Breece Hall, who, if Dalvin signs, his ADP will assuredly drop. How far do you think we see? Let's say Dalvin signs, right? And they give him a contract that, I mean, if he signs, it's going to be a contract that's he feels is valuable. So some sort of role. I imagine Breece Hall drops to maybe the 4th round. What are you thinking on the movement of Cooks and Hall's ADP if Cook signs there?
Breece Hall in the 4th round would be a player I'd be happy to draft every single time. We're still talking about a running back in Dalvin Cook that his prior employer was more than happy to just sort of let go and not worry about where he's going to land elsewhere. We all, I think, focus on the results we've seen in the past with these players, and we try to forecast, how they're going to play in the future based off of that. Running back, the most volume-heavy position. This is not a situation, in my opinion, where we can reliably project Dalvin Cook to get the same kind of volume he got in Minnesota. So I feel like that is going to influence people's decision-making here. Cook around pick 94, which is where he goes right now, is probably going to creep up a little bit, which I think he's already a little too expensive for somebody who's currently unemployed, shortly to be employed, obviously. So it's a really weird scenario where I think Breece Hall is more likely to end up being your kind of league winner selection. Early round draft pick by this Jets organization that I think that they see as a more important piece of their immediate future than Dalvin Cook, right? So I guess that's a little rambling there, but that's kind of how I feel about it. I'm not as interested in Cook as I am Breece Hall, even if Cook signs with the team here.
No, we're on the same page. And he just got drafted. And I think you and I even talked about him last time you and I were together on stream. But we both agree that there have been enough rumblings, even though we probably should have known this already given the offensive coordinator change. Ravens offense is going to be a lot different this year. And we do not have enough of Lamar Jackson in our individual portfolios.
No. And it's kind of hard to get him with Mark Andrews unless you're willing to reach in the 2nd and 3rd round. But with Todd Monken as the OC now, Brian, there may be significant value with all these wide receivers that are still relatively affordable. I think we have to let go of the framework we have in mind where, this is a Ravens offense that isn't going to pass a lot. So therefore these receivers are a little too expensive. They could be too cheap if this team is all of a sudden one of the most aggressive passing offenses in the league, which Todd Monken is known for.
Yeah, go ahead and make this pick, and then I'll pontificate a little more about this new Ravens offense.
All right. I like the upside of Brandon Ayuk with the 49ers this year, and he correlates with Christian McCaffrey. So that is why we want Brandon Ayuk here.
Okay, nice. So going back to this Ravens offense, I mean, we had the initial clip of James Jones on some, I can't remember which segment it was on which TV show, but saying like, this offense is going to be different. And Zay Flowers is that guy, right? And then we see some clips of Zay Flowers, and then we hear reports that Flowers is catching the most passes of all the receivers so far. Bateman's still not practicing. So to me, Flowers is the clear buy of this group, but we also have Odell Beckham, who's, I don't think his ADP has budged much. Aguilar, if they do go more 4 wide, as reports are indicating, Aguilar is going to be on the field more. And shout out to you for calling him out the last time we drafted. And honestly, it could be more for Isaiah Likely too if they run him in the slot or Andrews or vice versa, and to get both of those guys on the field at the same time.
Yeah, and who else do we have lingering in the Ravens wide receiver room that could be somewhat
Well,
meaningful, at least as we get into the
we got Devin Duvernay too, who
Devin
was
Duvernay is someone I
going
didn't
in the
even
company
think
last year.
about when we last spoke. So I feel like he could be someone that they rely on. We've got a former first round draft pick in Laquan Treadwell, who's also on this roster.
Oh yeah,
There's definitely some round 18 appeal in these types of contests, Brian, with players like that. All right, what
totally.
are we gonna do here in round 5? I am trying to get more of Deontay Johnson than I have, so I'm going to select him again here. I did select him in the team I did last night. This is the number one. We'll talk about him all throughout the NFL season as we put out our daily fantasy content, Brian. But the number one underperforming wide receiver from 2022, Deontay Johnson, 0 touchdowns. I think the target share is still going to be relatively similar here. So I feel like just betting on some simple regression there is more than okay.
Totally agree. And we've seen his ADP rise over the entire summer to now settling in at the mid 5th round. So totally get that. Let me see here. The other guy I wanted to ask you about who officially signed since you and I last talked was DeAndre Hopkins, now in Tennessee. We see his ADP also has solidified round 4, basically. He lasted until the first pick of the 5th round in this draft. But as a result, we've also seen Ryan Tannehill's ADP increase, which to me is interesting because, right, there's still the threat of Malik Willis, who's apparently improved tenfold since last year, according to coaches, but also the drafting of Will Levis, right? There's a lot of signs that they're not super pumped about Ryan Tannehill. But I guess what the field is thinking in Tannehill's ADP rising since the Hopkins signing is that Tennessee isn't just going to lay down and die this year, that they're still going for it. Like making a move like Hopkins gives Tannehill's job security a little more credibility if they're at all in the playoff hunt.
No, and that's exactly the correct way to interpret that information we've been given with the signing. They don't intend to fold. Now, the question will be, what do they do if they are out of the race? Does that change their decision making? And I do think that there is definitely still significant risk there. You're on year 2 of Malik Willis. Maybe you want to showcase him or see what you have. Obviously, you've got Will Levis there. So the team has already told us that pretty much after this year, I don't think they're committed to Ryan Tannehill at all. So I don't think we expect Tennessee to be one of the key players in the AFC South, never mind the entire AFC. It's a very, very competitive conference this year. And I think that's the biggest risk with taking Tannehill or Hopkins or any of these players is Tennessee feels like a team, Brian, where if things do not go right in the first part of the season, they may actually start trading some of these pieces because they're probably on the cusp of needing to go through a rebuild here. Obviously, massive speculation to introduce that on the show here, but I do think that's a real threat with the Tennessee Titans this season.
Yeah, I think it is, especially from our outside perspective. You have to wonder. I know Hopkins said one of the primary drivers for his signing location would be stability in the front office and stability in the team. I guess that would go against that, but this would not be the first time that a front office has completely turned around and stabbed a player in the back. So I could certainly see that. What are you thinking here for your 6th round pick?
It's a little bit, it's not an incredible reach, but it's a little bit of a reach to ensure that I get a high upside pairing with Josh Allen. I'm taking Gabriel Davis here.
Nice. Yeah. So this is a great point of discussion as well. This Bills receiving room. So we'll put down the back burner until your 7th round pick is made. What are you thinking here for your 7th round pick? And then we'll dive into the Bills receiving room.
You got a 1-1-4-0 build here. I'm not really worried about forcing anything at tight end just yet. Just best player available is what I'm thinking. Looking at some correlations, I do need to think a little bit about a New Orleans Saint. If I want to get maybe Derek Carr as a second quarterback, to have a couple of pieces there with Olave and Carr. Tampa Bay, I was considering Evans. He came off the board. That would be the other side of that Week 17 game with Olave's Saints. Probably looking for a Patriot at some point, not in this spot in round 7, just because of the Week 17 upside with the Bills, who I'm now heavily invested in.
Would you consider real quick? Would you consider either Darren Waller still on the board or Cam Akers here in this spot?
Cam Akers is probably the best running back available, and given that I am a little light at the position, he's definitely on my radar right now. Player level take here with Cam Akers, independent of what's going on with my team right now. I don't my concern with Akers is pass volume. I know this is only a half-point format, but obviously he's going to dominate the touches in that backfield. That's the baseline expectation here. But I'm always a little more leery, Brian, of these running backs that don't really have a ton of involvement in the passing game.
True. No, I totally agree. I think for me, it's more of a team level regression take, thinking that the Rams will bounce back if Stafford is healthy and they got all their guys back. So, but I think just in general, just an easy pick in round 7. I've been taking him some in round 6. So for him to last year plus the correlation, I think regardless of your player take to get him past ADP and with extra correlation, that is a no-brainer probably.
Almost a full round behind his average draft position here, Brian. And obviously that is probably driven a little bit. It's not just me doing this. I think everyone is catching on to trying to jam their wide receivers onto their rosters in the first portion of these drafts. So the running backs tend to fall a little bit. Although I will say, and I mentioned this in our staff chat last night, you and I went back and forth on it a little bit. I do feel like some of the July and August only drafters have started to enter the chat here, so to speak. I have seen some picks that are very, very deviant from ADP. Quentin Johnston, who just came off the board, I have seen him regularly go in the 4th and 5th round sometimes from some users, which I think is kind of interesting. Dameon Pierce, I've seen him go in the 4th or 5th round. So yeah, dude, I think the draft rooms here on Underdog relative to where they were even a week ago or a month ago, they feel a little softer to me anyway. That's been my anecdotal experience.
No, I think it's a good point because we talk about how sharp Underdog has been in comparison to DraftKings over the past couple of months. But we're in our own little best ball bubble. Most people, 90% of people, are just starting to even think about this. So as we start to get those types of drafters in these drafts, naturally the rooms will soften up a little bit. So that's a really good point. Now, let's go back to this Bills wide receiver situation. So you got Gabe Davis here. Allen's quote from Gabe or about Gabe yesterday was, he's taking steps, important part of the offense, everything you want to hear, right? Obviously. But to me, the more interesting part, the correlations, is that you can take Josh Allen early and have a plethora of options later, rounds 10 plus. So we have Dalton Kincaid, who we've already gotten some glowing reports about his versatility in this offense. Khalil Shakir, talking about him playing an important role, stepping up in year 2. But then we have these trio of guys behind him, Sherfield and Deontay Hardy. And the third name is escaping my mind here. But those guys have gotten some love too. Sherfield, known for his run blocking, especially in Miami. And maybe some reports that Buffalo wants to run a little bit more this year, so Sherfield gets on the field a little more. But Deontay Hardy, they're talking about using in that Isaiah McKenzie role from the last couple of years. And if that's the case, Hardy makes a ton of sense as a round 18 pick in any sort of Buffalo correlation. If we can get, a couple of design touches per game in one of the best offenses in the league.
Oh my God, Brian, talk about the Isaiah McKenzie role. One of my favorite plays in daily fantasy over the last couple of years with these Buffalo Bills. We also have rookie Justin Shorter, who they selected in day 3 of the 5th round. So I feel like he'll have something to say as well this preseason as far as role is concerned there. I am most interested right now in, I guess, the chalkier take there and going with Khalil Shakir as the next best receiver to consider. I'll be honest with you, the player that I wanted was James Cook because I feel like he's going to have a much better role this year. That just came out from team reporter Joe Buscaglia and some other Bills reporters that are at camp. So that was kind of something I was eyeing here. But I am more than okay with taking the number 1 running back from the Kansas City Chiefs offense, Isaiah Pacheco, who should probably be in that role all season long here.
I agree. And honestly, it sounds like your son has a lot of takes back there about the
Bills offense. Yeah, he does. So that was, that's the team to own this year because gets everybody excited, all age groups. I appreciate that for sure. So now I got a couple of running backs in round 7 and 8, which in general is not something I do when I go with a running back in the first round, but I'm actually okay with this build, Brian. With this many early picks invested at the running back position, I'm okay with letting that go a little bit and maybe trying to maximize value at some other spots now, depending on what falls to me.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, is this a possible 4 running back roster given the allocation you've already given it?
It's definitely on the table. Now, I will say with some of the camp news here, I think some of these late running backs are still worth taking flyers on. Zamir White, we talked about off the top of the show here. Who else goes super late that I have been taking occasionally? Maybe even a guy like a Melvin Gordon. Baltimore running backs have not necessarily had the best health over the last couple of years, so Melvin Gordon could fall into a big role. So I think that's, I guess the reason I'm talking about that now is this taking players like that at the very end, Brian, could be how I land on like a 5 or 6 running back build instead.
For sure. And Dobbins isn't practicing yet, right? Is it some sort of contract issue? I know they asked Harbaugh about it yesterday, and he said that's a JK issue. So I assume it's contract related, but given his injury history and given Edwards' injury history and given this potential situation, whatever it may be, I understand that Gordon's signing a lot more now.
And running back is not something I want here. This is my highest exposed player on the board, and so I'm being a little more careful when I select this player. But because I do have Pacheco now, I love this correlation with the Chiefs and Bengals. Little mini correlation on this roster. I don't think it's a bad idea to grab exposure to that game anytime you can get it in this format.
I mean, 9th round for a guy. I mean, I don't know if you've seen this, but did you see Tyler Boyd's most recent Instagram post?
Oh my God. I did. You talking about the Plan B post here?
The dude gets after it. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say. The dude gets after it. So,
so listen, there is
round 9. Yeah.
Yeah. He is definitely getting after it for sure. He's ready to compete. He's looking to score, and we love having that on our roster. No, but obviously made this point several times, I think, on this channel. Anything at all happens to Higgins, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd going to benefit the most. But even if nothing happens, still a great value here in best ball in the 9th round. Don't have to worry about a managed decision there. If he pops off, gets a couple of touchdowns from Joe Burrow, he'll be in your lineup, and you'll be happy about it.
Speaking of that wide receiver situation, I took my first share of Charlie Jones, their rookie pick, in round 18 yesterday or the day before. Not a guy I've been targeting whatsoever, not even a guy I've read much about. I was looking for some Cincinnati correlation, missed on some guys, and my thought process was in one of these biggest contests that if Boyd or Higgins or Chase goes down, and this is a 3 wide receiver heavy offense, maybe this guy they drafted can step in and offer some production in those circumstances. So I'm not convinced he's the wide receiver 4. It could be Trenton Irwin. It could be someone else. But I just thought I'd let you know. I'm sharing everything I'm doing here, Chris.
No, I appreciate that because we're talking about ultimately we're thinking and looking ahead to that. What is it, like 440 person final round of this contest? Very low percentage chance, let's be honest, that we're going to sneak multiple teams through to that final. Yeah. But if we do, players like Charlie Jones, if they're on a roster of ours that get there, we're probably going to be the only player in the contest that has him because he's not really being drafted right now. And that's exactly what we need to give ourselves a little bit of an edge on that field. With the prize for like the playoff payouts so heavily weighted to what happens in week 17, this is what makes Best Ball Mania 4 or any of these other tournaments on Underdog just a little bit different to think about than really any other fantasy football format. We're going to be drafting players like Charlie Jones, who we would never consider in any other format.
We will be considering him in the next 3 weeks for NFL preseason, but that is about it. Please tell me you're considering Dalton Kincaid in the next couple of picks here to pair up with that Josh Allen.
Oh, I mean, I think we have to double stack Josh Allen. Pick 134. I think I can let that go a little bit. I liked this player a lot more when he was about 40 picks cheaper, but yeah. I still love Nico Collins with the Houston Texans. And the Houston Texans are still an extremely easy offense to stack in the second half of drafts, Brian. Obviously, we have low win total expectations there. Texans not expected to be a super high-performing team this year, but if they're going to be losing as many games as the market expects them to, they're going to be passing a lot, which gives CJ Stroud a really good opportunity to develop. And then in fantasy land, which is all we care about, guys like Nico Collins, a really good chance to score some fantasy points.
Totally agree. I mean, Nico Collins is should be the clear number 1 wide receiver there. And I think both the Texans and the Panthers, I mean, we've talked about it seemingly for the past couple of months on these streams. We think both those offenses are undervalued just because of the rookie quarterback situation, how cheap they are. So, I am going to be overweight on both of those teams' offenses.
So we'll take Kincaid here, and we will now have our Josh Allen double stack. And at this point, as far as the Bills are concerned, I think I'm now done selecting Bills players. That is the maximum cap I'm willing to hit on any given roster with any given offense is 3 players, including the quarterback.
Well, that was actually my next question for you. There is some data out there. Obviously, it's very limited data that if you do quad stack, triple stack, whatever degree you want to call it, 3 pass catchers plus a quarterback, that there is some leverage there. Granted, the sample size is pretty small. I think, Chris, the only times I would do it are for these super stud quarterbacks, and that last piece would have to be super cheap. So whether it's
Yeah,
Shakir
that's fair.
around 16 or Hardy or somebody, I think it makes a ton of sense that way. But I know Chuck was telling someone in our Discord, which, by the way, if you're not already, occupyfantasy.com/Discord, come chat it up with us, discuss best ball strategy, mostly DFS strategy, but we got channels in there for everything. I know Chuck was telling someone you don't want to allocate too much draft capital early to one team. So I would much rather wait and maybe spread it out a little more like you did here. I think it would be a perfect setup on a perfect type of team where those back end roles are kind of unclear. So we get that last piece pretty cheap. That would make the most sense to me because, like you said, if Shakir goes off in week 16, 17, or Hardy or whoever the hell you draft late,
Right.
like that could be the difference in those all important playoff weeks. So I just want to get your take on that.
No, with a late pick on like a 4th wide receiver or maybe like another tight end from an offense or something like that, there's definitely worse ways to blow your final pick. So relative to the Bills, maybe the Chiefs as well, especially with the ambiguity at wide receiver with the Chiefs, I just don't know if I would do it with any other offense other than those 2 right now. Maybe Miami, Brian. We see Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle go super early, but there's not really any other Miami pass catcher that gets selected. I feel like there's some opportunity there, especially if anything happens to one of those 2 guys. So if you're into maybe some 18th round picks sneaking through that could be super valuable. I mean, who do we have there? Like Cedric Wilson. Yeah, this is what the people came for, Brian, talking about the bench players in the Miami Dolphins.
But no, it's a legit question because, right, look, they literally have 2 guys being drafted first 2 rounds and then no other pass catchers, including their tight end, despite their quarterback being drafted in round 8 or so.
Right.
So
Robbie Anderson, whatever he's calling himself these days, Chosen Anderson, formerly known as Robbie Anderson, is on Miami now. We've got River Crackcraft, who those deep into this like we are. River Crackcraft, a player that was also in San Francisco with Mike McDaniel, so very familiar with the offense there, knows the offense. We love those players. Eric Izukanma, Braylon Sanders were with Miami last preseason. Braxton Berrios, formerly of the Jets. So a lot.
I didn't realize Berrios was on the team, by the way. I didn't realize Berrios was there. He could be a sneaky 18th round pick because we've seen him produce when he's gotten some opportunity.
So all right, we got to make a pick here. Let's see. Well, I think I'm sort of backdooring this Houston stack now. I'll go with Singletary as a 4th running back. A little early for him, but I'm looking at this roster and the fact that I have Nico Collins, Deontay Johnson, Brandon Ayuk, even with McCaffrey, who I selected in the 1st round. I'm thinking about upside builds for quarterbacks like CJ Stroud, Brock Purdy, and Kenny Pickett, who are all relatively cheap. So I think I've sort of made my or suggested my lean here is CJ Stroud on this team.
Yeah, and I think Chuck has mentioned the point on our streams in the past that while traditionally running back quarterback not the strongest correlation, but we do see some leverage in pairing up a running back with your quarterback in these best ball contests. So especially in formats like the higher dollar ones or the smaller field ones where more people advance out of round 1, or it's just the typical regular season and the top 4 payout or whatever, is more powerful in those formats, but it's still relatively powerful and positively correlated in these formats as well.
We had Rashee Rice go ahead of MVS here with those Kansas City Chiefs here, Brian. I know we maybe made some jokes privately here, but the opinion and the take on Rashee Rice this season has changed so dramatically in the last week. It's unbelievable. I do think taking him ahead of MVS probably a little aggressive here, but if you've been reading some of those Chiefs reports from training camp, it's hard not to be a lot higher on Rashee Rice than we were a week ago.
I mean, dude, today is Thursday, right? Like as of Monday or Sunday even, it was like Rice is being mentored by Sky Moore, taking it slowly, thinking first interpretation for me was, okay, maybe a redshirt year with so many guys on the roster. 2-3 days later, now he's leading the team in receptions with the first team. And so, yeah, sentiment has certainly 180'd. But again, that's the beauty of drafting late July, early August, when a single piece of news can move ADP so much.
I still have a lot of interest in the cheapest asset here that I think is viable, Richie James. I know some people are starting to buy into Justin Ross, the former Clemson standout wide receiver who had a lot of injuries, obviously derail his attempt to become an NFL player here. But I still prefer James to Ross here, Brian. I have not selected any Ross just yet. But those are like your classic. Well, I guess Ross only at this point because Richie James is starting to rise. Ross would be your classic. I guess, I've got Mahomes and Kelsey, and maybe I take another one of these wide receivers. If you're between Ross in the 18th round and somebody else like, I don't know, like a Josh Reynolds or a Tutu Atwell, like I get it. Taking Ross as like your fourth chief wide receiver is not the worst decision in the world there. Sam Laporta with the Detroit Lions, Brian. That's another one of the biggest risers at tight end. He goes right around this range. Have you been taking any of him at all in your builds this season just yet? Or is that like player on the list that we're like, okay, maybe we need to start taking him a little bit more?
Yeah, I think he's on that list. I've taken him, I think, even with the field so far through 60 drafts or so. And I actually had a build 2 days ago where it was 3 rookie tight ends. It was Kincaid, it was Sam Laporta, it was Michael Mayer, something that I would never do before the year 2023. But I think these guys are in positions, especially Kincaid, Laporta to a little bit lesser extent, Mayer to the least extent, given their ADPs naturally, to produce in year one if they just use these guys like pass catchers, slots, big slots.
So I went with Chiga Conko here from the Titans. A little bit of correlation play with the Houston Texans. 2 games in the playoffs this season, and Chig fell about 15 picks. His ADP is right around 133 right now, and he has been falling. This is not an ADP move that I necessarily. I understand why it's happening, Brian, but I don't agree with it. I think the field is assuming, we got Hopkins here now. Chig's going to be affected by that. He's not going to have as many opportunities. The routes are completely different. Yeah, maybe the targets will shift a little more towards the wide receivers, but I don't think his playing time is going to be decreased at all here. And he's still going to be on the field, particularly when they're getting closer to the scoring area and they're looking to throw it in the end zone, right? So I am more than okay to buy the dip with Chiga Conko here at tight end.
I mean, excellent pick. That many spots past ADP plus the correlation. And yeah, I agree with you. I mean, we're honestly beforehand, we were drafting Chig for his big playability, not necessarily for this massive target share, right? We were playing him for these. We've seen him be some of the most elusive and explosive tight ends, yards per route run in the past decade, basically. And we're playing him for that, right? We want these big plays from Chig, and Hopkins signing, if anything, could open up the field a little more for him.
So what do you think about these really dusty New England Patriots that are still on the board? A little bit of a report from their training camp practices that maybe they intend to just rotate fresh players in and out all season long at skill positions to maybe create a little bit of an edge that way. To be honest, Brian, that feels a lot like what they did last year. I remember trying to forecast what they were going to do, and we were very frustrated with trying to figure out who's going to start for the Patriots. Do you have any wide receivers late here that you're most interested in? Thinking like Tyquan, Devontae Parker, Kendrick Bourne. Do you have like a lean here or not really?
I'm still on the Tyquan train. Year 2 guys typically make the biggest jump. When drafting guys late, looking for guys who surpass ADP expectations, it's normally the younger guys than the older guys. So I would be much less surprised for Tyquan making the leap than I would for Devontae Parker or Kendrick Bourne. So I'm going to continue to hammer Tyquan Thornton when I have a chance and when I need New England correlation. And if all else fails and I'm missing one last piece and I've missed out on every other Patriot, then I'll go for Parker and Bourne. But to me, we're playing the age curve game here, and Tyquan's certainly a guy that I'm willing to target.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that because as long as we don't get sniped, I broke the rule, so we probably will. He is who I am considering here to get as my my bring back in my Josh Allen stack on this roster. Went with Raheem Mostert in the 14th round. Don't want to devote too much time about like strategy on these late picks because it's starting to get a little thin down here, but feel like he is going to have a big role, at least in certain games. And we know the upside that I think he is literally the fastest player in the league. We know what upside he has when he gets going. So we like having that on our teams.
I gotta say, man, I think the curse might be broken. If we can hold off and we get Taekwon here, like we mentioned Cam Akers live, we got him. Mentioned Dalton Kincaid by name. If we can go 3 for 3 on players being named, then I think the snipe curse might be over on this stream.
I like that you're flag planning the snipe curse being complete here. We've got to survive a couple more picks.
I know. It may have been premature. We'll see.
3 quarterbacks for the owner here of the number 1 pick.
I was going to mention that earlier. That was a really weird, like,
back to back. All right, Mahomes, Cousins. He's got 4 quarterbacks actually. That seems like a good way to waste the first overall pick.
And Luke was also the guy who took Breece Hall at 3-1, despite the Dalvin Cook likely signing. So, RIP to Minky.
Yeah, exactly. Hopkins and Treylon Burks did not. Maybe he will go with a 5th quarterback with Ryan Tannehill. We'll see what happens there. We got to worry about our own team, though, so I'm not going to be too hard on Luke here. Okay, I've got a 1-5-6-2 build. I'm going to only go with 1 more quarterback. And speaking of the naming players curse, I think everybody already knows which quarterback I want because I already talked about him earlier in the show. But I will take Taekwon.
3 for 3. Okay, 3 for 3, and let's pray that. I mean, we're just being brash at this point, but let's pray that CJ Stroud. We'll say his name, CJ Stroud, lasts till round 16.
So, again, if anybody wants to make me feel like I wasted $25, you can do something very hilarious right now if you're still in this draft lobby. No, Brian, we went through some of your favorite late round picks on the last show you and I did together. Has anyone entered that list that we did not talk about for you over the last couple of weeks, or are we still pretty much in the same place we were last time we talked?
Yeah, let me pull up some stuff here and let me see on my end who I'm thinking about more and more often. Really quickly, I had been drafting him. I was right in lockstep with you. Maybe not as aggressive as you were, but Mecole Hardman getting some positive buzz. People are finally starting to catch on that he's a real player for the Jets with Aaron Rodgers. So nice to see his ADP rise a little bit. Who else am I taking late? Let me see here. Let me pull it up. Sorry, I'm just pulling up my exposures on my side.
All good. I can tell you someone that I have not. I don't think I have taken him once yet. I've got pretty even allocation to all the quarterbacks. I expect to have pretty low and even allocations to all the quarterbacks. But Kyler Murray with the Arizona Cardinals, I haven't found myself in a position where I've wanted to take him. And I think that's one of those situations, kind of like the Chargers or the Jaguars, Brian, where I'm probably going to have to force myself to a little more intentionally try to get a little bit more exposure to him. Obviously going to miss some time at the beginning of the season, but I guess maybe it's not so obvious. I think that's the rub with the news. It feels like he could be back much sooner than later. So his ADP starts to be a lot more interesting here late. And the only reason I'm discussing him is because he's the top player on my own rankings that I have no allocation to yet in my exposures.
Yeah, I've been taking a decent amount. I'm looking now at my exposures on Underdog, and I have 8%, so roughly in line with the field. Nothing crazy. I thought I had drafted him earlier a lot, just over the past handful of drafts. I haven't drafted any, so I don't know if there's anybody else that I'm really starting to try to get more of late. I guess the backup running back situation for Minnesota, I've just been trying to get some Ty Chandler, some Dwayne McBride, just some protection against that running back dead zone.
Oh my God. I think we got one more pick to survive, Brian. And this is the Dalton Schultz owner. He did not do it. He took John Mechie. So he's probably going to be mad at me here. But I'm going to take CJ Stroud.
Nice pick. Well, we survived 4 for 4 on the curse being broken. Sucks for SWHWC, who I don't know if he was paying attention. If they were paying attention, could have conceivably thought that you wouldn't take CJ Stroud as your number 2 quarterback, but maybe he's doing multiple drafts. I don't know. Whatever. Congrats to us. Congrats to you. This draft has gone really well, I got to say.
I don't hate this team. Again, I tend to kind of step away from it and analyze it after the fact. I usually post a few screenshots in our Underdog channel in our Discord and talk about what I was trying to do, the stacks that I have, just to, promote that we're putting this content out there a little bit for our members. Those of you who are watching here on YouTube, obviously join the Discord. You can get some access to that. That would be much appreciated. We'd love to have you in there talking about all things NFL throughout the summer and, of course, the season as it kicks off. Ty Chandler, you did just mention him, Brian, comes off the board. I do not have as much of him as I would like at this point. Really powerful, eye-opening information in a recent, I'll call it was an email from a writer that we're both a fan of, JJ Zachariason from Late Round QB, talking about how the statistical profile for similar players like to Alexander Mattison in years past has not been good as far as outcomes go in fantasy football. So I feel like I am a little bit unsure about how to treat Mattison now as a result of reading that. But I do know the best way to react is maybe be a little more invested in his backups.
For sure. Totally agree there. And we'll know more about these guys as the preseason rolls on here. We'll get some information on Chandler and McBride and even Kene, if I forget.
Kene Nwangwu, yes. I mean, he's still out there. The risk there, and I wish I could remember who I saw put this out. Maybe it was Pat Karan during his live stream a little over a week ago on the anniversary of him winning last year's contest. The concern with like either Chandler or McBride, Brian, is I think at least one of those guys is probably assuming all four stay healthy, is probably a lock to be a game day inactive most weeks because Nwangwu is their kick returner, right? Like kick returner, punt returner. So he will be active. And I think these are these fringe things that we think about as we're trying to draft players late. We want guys, it's hard to do, obviously, but we want to try to get through the whole season with 18 players that are not only going to be healthy, but also active so they can contribute to our rosters.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And again, I'm excited to see those guys in preseason. And if you're a fan of round 16, 17, 18 picks, if you're a fan of uncovering those edges, you probably already love preseason DFS, but that is our bread and butter. Literally our entire staff has turned their attention towards NFL preseason DFS. I'm excited to get those videos in our daily plug going, Chris. And for those who have never, if you're watching this video and you've never played NFL preseason DFS, basically we do all the research for you. Read between the lines, historical trends for playing time, listen to what coaches are saying, read every single practice report, and we're able to really get big edges on the field in terms of ownership and opportunity at all positions. And that starts next Thursday, as Chris said at the top of the show with the Hall of Fame game, and it really gets going once we get weeks 1, 2, and 3 of the preseason. So, Chris, I'm super looking forward to that. Always a profitable time of the year, and honestly, it will help us in our best ball drafts as we get more clarity on these back half of the rosters.
No, paying attention to preseason has always helped and informed my process, getting ready for week 1 daily fantasy, getting ready for managed leagues that I have to draft still, because you really get a good sense for who is the most valuable players on each roster. The weird thing about preseason is we're not going to see most of the most valuable players on each roster play a ton. So I actually, like, as far as season-long stuff is concerned, best ball, if we have like a rookie or like a new player on a new roster, like if you went over somewhere as a free agent and they're not getting a ton of run in preseason, Brian, I know this might seem counterintuitive to the uninitiated, so to speak. That's actually a good sign in a lot of cases for their regular season role because they're being protected, right? So that's always something I pay attention to as we get into this time of year.
Totally. Absolutely. No, I'm super pumped for it. And listen, we're full in on NFL preseason. So make sure you're subscribed here on the channel and make sure you are a member of OccupyFantasy.com to take advantage of all that preseason information. Last round here, Chris, are you going with the last bill or you got another idea in mind?
I have let me see what's available at pass catcher. Shakir's gone, so I don't think I'm gonna go with another bill here. I'm tempted, Brian, to click on Mecole Hardman once again. I have a ton of exposure to him, but I actually did just go with Michael Carter, which may be, I mean, obviously my temptation is now gone. That's good. So the curse is still alive, Brian, mentioning players and they're getting selected ahead of us. I do have an interest in another wide receiver here. I'm not sure who it's going to be just yet. Kenny Pickett comes off So this New York Giant wide receiver situation is fairly ambiguous. Corey Davis is a player that I do not think will be a Jet by the time the season starts, and I think the field agrees that's why he's still down here.
His ADP, by the way, ADP has moved up 4 spots since, which is like negligible at this point in the draft. But there was some positive movement on Corey Davis, which was interesting to me.
Let's do this because we've done it before on a show together, and I do have a little bit of a fringe reason to be invested in the correlation here. I have Raheem Mostert as one of my running backs. Nelson Aguilar with the Baltimore Ravens. Yeah. I mean, if Bateman is unable to get going, look, it's not the sexiest pick. It's round 18 in a contest here with over 600,000 people participating. But if Nelson Aguilar is a starting wide receiver for a Todd Monken pass-heavy offense, this is the offense that allowed Jameis Winston to throw for over 5,000 yards and 30 touchdowns and also 30 interceptions a few years back. So these fringe players that we're not thinking about actively on the Ravens, probably a lot more important than we're giving them credit for right now.
Love it, man. This is one of my favorite teams that you've drafted together with me. So congrats on winning $3 million with this draft. So I hope you spend it well.
I appreciate that, Brian. I love the opportunity, the optimism, and the opportunity to pick your brain on fantasy football every single time we get together. So we'll have some more drafts on the channel this week and weekend for you. Mixed of our cast, myself, Chuck, Brian, whoever's available, we will get them on here and we'll do another NFL show for you. We're even mixing in, Brian, some NBA shows. I know Chuck has been leading those. Did a great draft with Brandon, one of our other contributors last weekend. So maybe we'll mix in some more of those as things heat up with the basketball side of things. You certainly won't see me on those shows. But Brian, is there any business that you want to take care of before we let the people go today?
No, just I can't stress enough that NFL preseason is starting. It is profitable. It is fun. It's a really engaging time of year for our community. So make sure you're subscribed to OccupyFantasy.com by next Thursday if you're not already. Make sure you're in our Discord, OccupyFantasy.com/Discord, and make sure you have those accounts funded, ready to roll for the Hall of Fame game. So you can follow Chris on Twitter. You see it on screen. You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow us at Occupy Fantasy. And again, OccupyFantasy.com is where you get everything. And make sure you subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. It is free to do, and you'll get notified whenever we go live or upload any videos. So thanks for listening, and good luck in your future best ball drafts.